These kids are in a IDP camp. They're called internally displaced persons camps when the refugees are in their own country. And the IDP camps in Darfur, you can tell which kids go to school and which kids don't. Because when they go to school, they get a school lunch, which is basically a cup of porridge. It looks like a cup of oatmeal. But the UN provides them with some micronutrients that they mix in with that porridge. And those kids are brighter-eyed, their skin is clear, they're more alert, they're more curious. And the kids who don't go to school are malnourished. And it's obvious, you know, what malnourishment looks like. We have a lot of focus in clinics as well. I was in this clinic in Uganda where the patients relied on their families to be fed, and many families couldn't afford to feed their relatives, so they were just languishing in hospital with nothing to eat. I found this group who cooks meals twice a week and brings them to the hospital to feed people there. And actually now this group has InStoves to work with, so they're able to use their resources more effectively and bring more meals to the folks in this hospital. But I saw kids in this hospital with HIV/AIDS who were starving to death in the hospital because they had been abandoned by their families. With a couple of stoves in the hands of this small group who are helping to feed the people in the hospital, we can directly save lives. And natural disasters, we're now starting to get stoves out when there are natural disasters. It's a long road to get to the attention of the major aid organizations that are doing interventions. This is the Philippines, right after that awful storm. We just shipped a couple of weeks ago stoves to Vanuatu, where they're still recovering from their tropical storm. You know, we get our news cycles where disasters hit the news and then they disappear, but the damage doesn't. And people in Haiti are still recovering from the earthquake. My partner Damon, when I met him, he was just back from Uganda, where he had gone with some prototypes of our stoves, and he hired some local guys to build these stoves. And and then he placed 7 different stoves in 7 different locations with slightly different configurations of the materials and the construction process. And then he went back a year later to see which did the best. And with that information, he and I started our partnership and started building InStoves. And our first stove was a 60-liter stove. That's a 15-gallon pot. And that today is our small stove. But he and I spent a couple of years tinkering, improving the stove design, figuring out the construction process. Whoops, a brand new device, I'm still learning it. In 2010, I got a contract with a German aid organization called GIZ. It's basically the German equivalent of USAID, only without the politics. They just do aid. And GIZ funded me to go to Bida, Nigeria, in the north of Nigeria, and bring 3 stoves to a girls' school and install them and then measure the impacts. And in the Bida school, after a couple of weeks, we had 3 stoves installed. There are 1,200 students in this school, and with 3 stoves, they were feeding the kids all their meals every day. It's 5 years later, those 3 stoves are still in service. They're still feeding the 1,200 girls and the student in the school. And they're saving 90% on their fuel bill. So where before they had to buy fuel once a month and they put it in a woodshed to keep it out of the rain, now they buy a year's supply and put it in the same spot. And they have 90% of the cost of fuel, which is quite expensive to spend on food and other school programs. In Bida, I learned one of the fundamental lessons of developing stoves is that you have to engage the cooks. If the cooks don't love your stove, it's not going to work. And one of these cooks said, Mr. Fred, can we use other pots on the stove? And I said, no, absolutely not. And I turned my back and looked, and she had put this frying vessel on top and was happily frying these lovely bean cakes, which became my favorite food the whole time I was in this school. We engaged cooks when we began this process. We still engage cooks as we develop new products for our stoves and develop new adaptations of our stoves. And the lesson learned, the cooks know. If I can get this to go the right way. No. Okay. This cook, just when I left, no, I went back a year later to visit these stoves. They were still in service. And this cook said, with the new stoves, my eyes don't water, my chest doesn't hurt, my back doesn't ache, and the baby on my back has stopped crying. It's the best testimonial I ever had. And it's the best testimonial I ever had. In 2011, I brought 200 stoves to Darfur. We installed them in schools. Today, almost all of those 200 stoves are still in service. They're feeding 80,000 kids every day with those 200 stoves. In 2013, we went to Senegal with 100 of our big stoves. Now our biggest stove is a 100-liter version with a 25-gallon pot. It's a massive stove, able to serve a lot of meals. And these are now distributing across Senegal into feeding programs. This is one of the events I was at. You can see in the background, you see that big pile of wood in the background? That's for one event. They were going to cook that. They were going to use all of that wood in the next 48 hours for this one festival in one kitchen in Senegal, in this city. And there were dozens of kitchens like this and massive amounts of firewood being used just to cook their food. People cook on big logs like this because it's the way they've been cooking since the Stone Age. It works. Unfortunately, they're deforesting at astronomical rates. Some places in Africa, it's 5% a year of the forest is disappearing. Can't really see the color on that. It kind of shows our coverage of Africa. We're now in 16 African countries, 27 countries around the world, and expanding our footprint every day. How good are our stoves? We've been to 2 testing labs. There's now a move afoot to bring international standardized testing to Cookstoves. And this is brand new. This has been kind of the field of backyard mechanics and tinkers, and no one's ever paid any attention to exactly what's going on. Over the last 4 or 5 years, there's been developed a global network of testing laboratories, all with similar equipment, able to test exactly what's happening with stoves. In the EPA labs in South Carolina and in the Aprovecha labs with our friends in Cottage Grove, our stoves are independently verified to reduce smoke emissions by 90%, to reduce fuel use by up to 90%. We just had a group in Jimma University in Ethiopia with 6 new stoves in one of the university kitchens, came up with 92% fuel savings in that application. And these stoves are very fast. They reduce cooking time by about half. The cooks really like that. Their job is to get the food produced, and if they can do it faster, the cooks are happier. So here's kind of a little graphic of the kind of wood savings that we accomplish. And also, our stoves use small wood the size of a couple of fingers. Now that's sustainable anywhere in the world. Even places where the forests are gone, there's still little twigs, there's still brush, there's still small wood that can be sustainably and used. We've developed a water pasteurizer in the last couple of years. I think I spoke about it last year. We've got one in service in Zambia. Water pasteurizer everything we do is based on the stove. So the water pasteurizer is attached to the lid of a pot. And we just take the lid off a regular pot, drop the water pasteurizer in, and water starts passing through from a gravity-fed tower or from a pump. And we can deliver 200 gallons of safe water per hour per stove, using 5 grams of wood per liter of water. That's an infinitesimal amount of fuel used. The reason people can't afford safe water in the developing world is because they can't afford the fuel to make the water safe. In Africa, if you go, the only safe water for Westerners is bottled water. It comes from the Coca-Cola plants. It costs more in Africa than it costs in Palo Alto. And these are $1-a-day economies. People can't afford to buy water, so they drink the bad water. Half the kids who die in Africa die of waterborne disease. This is 100% preventable. And we have a solution that we believe is going to work to deliver a lot of water at tiny, tiny prices and start to save lives that way. Our goal this coming year is to commercialize our water pasteurizer. So we're bringing a system back to Zambia. We're going to install it with some small business entrepreneurs on the grounds of a hospital near a school, and prove the model that this hardware can be used to create a small business that delivers water for tiny prices. And we're thinking something on the order of 4 or 5 cents for a jerry can of water, which is enough for a family for a day. That kind of money people will pay for water. And that kind of money would generate enough cash to build a viable, sustainable business. And this is the model of development in every field, that aid agencies no longer want to buy stuff and drop it off and wave goodbye. It's not solving any problems. You know, all the old saws about, well, you've got to teach people to fish. You don't bring them fish. It's more true now than ever. The funding is available for entrepreneurial models that creates local sustainable businesses and local sustainable enterprises. So we're very optimistic about our water pasteurizer.
Does it take gray water?
Pardon?
Does it take gray water?
I can input any water, yeah. If it's unattractive, I filter it. I pre-filter it, so I filter out the solids. But as far as safety, if you don't care about the cosmetics, I can, if it's a disaster, I can pump water out of a puddle on the ground and make it safe to drink. It won't be pretty, but it won't hurt you at all. In our field trials in Zambia, our sample source had, we measure E. coli as our indicator species. It had so many critters in the water that it was off the scale. We had to dilute it 4 times to get to the top of the readable scale of colonies of E. coli. And we were able to eliminate 100% of the pathogens in those water samples. So that was a pretty extraordinary, that was worse than gray water, and we've proved the viability of our system. So, yes?
Do you also have a distillation version where you want to remove inorganic contaminants?
We don't. Our first, it's triage. Our first priority is getting the critters out of the water that harm human health. The next level of intervention is organic stuff.
So I'll bring the mic because nobody can hear people.
We'll do Q&A. Okay. I'm leaving plenty of time for Q&A. Yeah. We have an autoclave that fits our stove. When Damon and I started, Damon was a medic when he was in the service, and he said, we got to have an autoclave to fit this stove. So I said, okay, well, let's find one. So we looked around and we found one in a catalog that looked pretty close. we thought, well, let's buy one and see if we can adapt it to our stove. So we bought our first unit and took it out of the box and put it in the stove, and it actually fit better than our own pot. So we were instantly in business. And we called up these guys in Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Aluminum Foundry, and said, hey, we want to talk to you. And now we have this wonderful love affair going on with the Wisconsin Aluminum Foundry. They're marketing our stoves, we're marketing their autoclaves, and the pair was just meant to be. I can sterilize a pot full of medical instruments or dressings with 800 grams of fuel, a pound and under 2 pounds of fuel in half an hour. And this works anywhere off the grid. We have a lot of these. This is actually our biggest selling product now, is the stove autoclave ensemble. The need is huge, and medical intervention is well funded. So folks can afford to buy these products for clinics. Most of them our biggest number is in the DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, which is a pretty difficult place, but there are thousands of small clinics across the country that have no way to sterilize their instruments. I saw one clinic in Kenya where they were putting surgical instruments in the sun between patients and hoping for the best. And the guidebooks there say, don't go to a hospital. If you get hurt, go to the airport and get out of Dodge, because the hospitals will hurt you. And again, with this technology, we can change some fundamental equations, and we know we're saving lives wherever there's an InStove with an autoclave. And last year we did a pilot project using the autoclave in Nepal in an experiment for medical waste disposal. It's another huge problem, another huge disease vector. Most hospitals, they just take this awful stuff and throw it out the back door, and it winds up in the dump. Well, it's toxic, it's unsafe, it's a huge disease vector, particularly in places where HIV/AIDS is epidemic, where diseases like polio are making a comeback, where TB is rampant. Having the ability to dispose of waste safely is critical for community health. So we have an academic paper coming out of UC Berkeley on this waste disposal method using InStoves and Wisconsin autoclave. And we have a production method we call Stove Factory in a Box. Now, Damon and I set out from the very beginning to design a production method that could be replicated anywhere in the world, because the writing's on the wall. We can't make these stoves on the scale we want to, which is hundreds of thousands, and ship them from Oregon to the developing world. We've got to create production closer to the end users. So Stove Factory in a Box is our model. We can put all the tools and all the parts in a container. We have one factory up and running in Nigeria. We send some of our team over to train local workers. And in this instance, I went for 2 weeks. At the end of 2 weeks, we were up to full production. We've developed a method that's very simple to teach. We've reduced all of the labor to semi-skilled tasks, and we've created this set of tools that force precision construction. So this group built out 400 stoves in less than 6 months, and so we've proved the technology transfer. We've proved the viability of our production method. We still have to work on the business models and the business sides. Unfortunately, the big man in the organization that took the factory on was simultaneously building a mansion that rivals anything I've seen in the Silicon Valley. And unfortunately, that's where the money went. So they built the 400 stoves and stopped. We have 2 factories now on our radar, one in Kenya and one in Zambia, both with partners that we know and trust, and both with NGOs, with non-governmental organizations, non-profit organizations who want to serve their countrymen. They want to make a living, but they don't need to get rich, and they don't need to steal it all. So these are just some scenes from our little Nigeria factory. And that was at the end of 2 weeks. I left after 2 weeks. 2 of my guys stayed for another 2 weeks to finish a little more subtle training in production management. But we know we can do it. There's an organization called the Global Alliance for Clean Cookstoves. It was founded about 5 years ago with UN Foundation money. Ted Turner's money started it. And Hillary Clinton was one of the primary movers and shakers in creating this global alliance. And this has really increased the visibility of the issues of clean cookstoves. The Global Alliance has a goal of delivering 20 million clean cookstoves by 2020. I don't know if they're going to get there, but they're spearheading the testing centers and the testing standards, and they're changing the basic landscape of clean cookstoves around the world. And right now, if you go to the Global Alliance website, they have a ranking of cookstoves by performance, and the InStove is number 1. This is a good quote from them. While some may say that the poor can't afford to adopt clean cooking, the opposite is the case. The poor pay heavily for their lack of access to clean cook stoves. The poor people can't afford to buy stoves. They need a hand up. We need to develop the mechanisms to get these stoves in the hands of people who can pay for them at some level. So commercial cooks. In Nigeria, the roadside restaurants are called mama puts, and mama has a 3-stone fire, which is the standard, and a pot of food cooking, and you can stop and get fed. They pay so much for fuel that they could afford an InStove, which costs about $1,000, but they could pay for one in less than a year if we had microfinancing in place, if we could give them the stove on credit, like Henry Ford did with Model T Fords, like the basic, the installment plan that really launched consumer society here. We don't want to launch consumer society, but we want vehicles to get these stoves in the hands of people who otherwise can't afford them. So we're hoping to build on some partnerships. We're going to Kiva. You all know that organization? It's an on-site investment place where you can invest $100 in Kiva, and they put it to good use. So we're going to go to Kiva for microfinance money to finance stoves for commercial cooks across the world. So our priorities coming up. In this last year, we created a second organization internally called InStove Manufacturing Limited. It's a benefit corporation. I don't know if you've heard of benefit corporations or B Corps. It's a new corporate structure. It's the only radical thing is that it turns the fundamental equation on its ear of what a board of directors can set as priorities. So in a benefit corporation, the directors are mandated to follow the mission first, and return on investment follows the mission. In a typical corporation, if the directors followed a humanitarian mission, they could be sued by their stockholders. In a benefit corporation, if they don't follow their humanitarian mission, they can be sued by stockholders. So now we're seeking capital. We have some very interesting investment opportunities in our benefit corporation that's going to allow us to expand our footprint across the world. We want to open foreign production units. We have 2 on the drawing boards now, like I said, 1 in Nigeria, 1 in Zambia. We've got a lot to learn about business. We need to hire some business professionals. I'm a humanitarian guy. I'm a nonprofit organizer, and I'm kind of a babe in the woods when it comes to business fundamentals. We need people on board who know a whole lot more than I do. So we want to increase our capacity both in Oregon and across the world. We want to hire more African staff. I have one African staff member. She's been invaluable. I need a dozen. And we want to expand it to new markets. And the need is just bottomless. We estimate the global need for stoves of our size and capacity to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 million units. Now, to date, we've delivered about 1,800 stoves. We have a long ways to go. My dream is, before I die, I'd like to see 1 million InStoves built and delivered. And I'm going to hold on to that dream. I'm going to read my books in my next life. My retirement has been indescribable. I've been to 20 African countries. I've been to 17 refugee camps. I've been places I never thought I would go. I don't recommend them. They're not tourist destinations, and they're heartbreaking, but they also keep... The first trip out to camps, I went to 15 refugee camps in one trip. And I came back and I couldn't speak. I just couldn't talk. It took almost 6 weeks before I could find my voice and even talk to my wife. And I found my voice by meditating on what I was going to do. How was I going to process this pain of the suffering of the poorest people on earth? And basically, get over it and get back to work was my solution, and it remains my solution. And I just want to keep doing this, and I hope to have your help. We've only been able to be successful because of the help of our friends. We made a lot of friends here last year when we came. We made a lot of friends with the National Humanist Association, and I hope I'm making some new friends here today. What can we do together? How can you get involved? Learn more about us. Our website is what it is. It's not slick, but there's a lot of information there. Volunteer with us. Most of you are not looking for internships, but maybe you have grandkids who are. We have a robust internship program, and we offer internships in everything from engineering to field work to social media development. We can use people with talents and with passion pretty much limitlessly. Introduce us to your friends. I have up here on the table a little flyer for 2 events I'm going to have at my sister's house, one tonight and one tomorrow night. And I'd invite you all to come, and let me give you a live demonstration of the stove. So I'd like to show you what the stove is and what it does, have some hors d'oeuvres and some drinks, and get to know each other better. But you may know some folks who'd be interested in meeting me, learning more about InStove. Please bring them over, and they're small, intimate events, but it would be great to spend more time with you all. New ideas. We need new ideas. We've got some interesting partnerships working on interesting things. We have a group at the University of Kentucky working with our stoves, using it to cook up biodiesel. We have another group at George Fox University in Oregon. It's a Quaker university. They're working on TEG, a thermal electric generator, where the stove generates its own electricity while it's cooking. So it could be a cell phone charging station, or it could power the pump for the water pasteurizer. We just finished a tortilla griddle. I have a project coming up in Oaxaca, Mexico, and to go to Mexico, you got to have a way to cook tortillas. So the local Hispanic community I've recruited cooks to help me develop the tortilla cooker, which is about ready for prime time. So by the end of this summer, we'll have stoves and tortilla cooking in Oaxaca for field trials. And your support is invaluable. We're a 501c3. We're a nonprofit. Your donations are deductible. So up here on the table, I have a sign-up sheet. I'd love for you to sign up and get on our mailing list. I won't spam you, but I will send you newsletters every 3 or 4 times a year. I have some brochures, one general brochure about InStove, one about the stoves, one about the autoclave, one about the pasteurizer, one about our impacts, about what one stove does. So one of our Cookstoves, cooking 6 hours a day, here's just one, offsets the CO2 of 313,000 miles of automobile driving, okay? Or the carbon footprint of 8 Americans. But that's vast, you know. We have huge carbon footprints. One stove will offset 8 American footprints, okay? This is low-hanging fruit. This is a way that you can put your money to work to offset your own carbon footprint, and that's not even mentioning the spillover effects of the benefits to the cooks and the kids and the environment wherever we're working. I think I don't know how I got there, but I'm ready for questions.
Okay, I'll bring the mic around.
Excellent presentation. 2 things that occurred to me. I was wondering if there were some type of fuel that could be grown that could be used for other than wood, you know, out of grasses or small bushes or things that would be better for the cook stove. And the other thing is have you ever heard of Dean Kamen's slingshot water purifier system that's made for the third world, where it can take any kind of water and turn it into water quality that is injectable? You know, it's a distilling system. So, you know, it's even cleaner than yours and uses a very small amount of electricity, but it's mostly, I think, using the electricity for heat. So it makes me think that it could be adapted to get its heat from a wood source. And have you heard of any of those 2 things?
I haven't, but I'm interested. If you come give me a note at the end, I'd like to look into
because,
that.
Because he made that for the third world, you know,
Yeah.
specifically. And Coca-Cola is partnering with him to distribute these things, you know, in the third world.
No, I'd be interested in learning more. As far as alternative fuel, when I came back from Darfur after that heartbreaking focus group, I put my team to work to build a briquette press to make briquettes as an alternative fuel. Now, in a super efficient wood stove, you can burn anything that's cellulose based. So briquettes are made from anything that is cellulose based. The most common substance in refugee camps is animal dung. They all have donkeys and goats, and there's cows, but waste paper, straw, crop waste, anything at all, can be made into kind of a slurry, and then with our mechanical press, pressed into sticks that burn with equal fuel value to wood in the stoves. So we're hoping to get, this is kind of mission creep, it's not core technology, but we're going to give away the designs for our briquette press, and we hope to have some pilot projects this coming year where we actually create some women's cooperatives making fuel out of found materials and making a living at it. So, yeah, a lot of thought's gone into it. The barriers are many, the hurdles are many, but we're working on it. Yes?
Again, about the water pasteurization process. Do you replicate the procedure which is used in pasteurizing milk, which is to heat to just below the boiling temperature, or do you actually boil the water?
Well, pasteurizing water, it's not necessary to boil it to bring it to pasteurization temperatures. It's 73 C is pasteurization temperature, and the cycle is like 30 seconds is overkill for killing all of the little critters that harm human health. And you know, the list is this long. Milk pasteurization is very similar, but it would be it would require some engineering to make our water pasteurizer into a milk pasteurizer. So as of this moment, we're not there, although we have been contacted by some organizations. If we can find some engineering help, we'd like to go there because it's a huge need.
So when you're pasteurizing water, is it a batch process or continuous?
It's a flow-through process.
Flow-through.
Yeah, we use a heat exchanger at the beginning to extract heat from the water that's leaving the system and preheat the water coming in. And then it's a reverse thermostatic valve that will only release water after it's been cycled for a minimum of 30 seconds. So every drop is guaranteed through this system.
Okay, that's the answer to what I was leading up to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, thanks, Sandy, for introducing you and your product a couple of years ago now. I was interested then, and I'm even more interested now that you've proven in the market that there is a market and there is a place for this product to go. How can I help you in what's going on, and how can perhaps the humanist community help it for you? This seems like an unbelievably great opportunity for me and for us to do something for the people in the world that need our help.
Well, thank you. What a great segue. You know, we're all just 3 degrees removed from every other person on Earth. Telling our story to people is a really invaluable job that you all can do. Someday I'm going to hit a group where somebody's got Oprah Winfrey on speed dial, and you know, somebody you know knows somebody who knows Oprah, who could open that door for us. That kind of connection would be amazing. We need more friends. We're available to come back. We can do more events. We can do house parties here. You know, you all live in the Silicon Valley where most of the money is, and I'm only 10 hours away, and I'll happily come back for events here. House parties are a very effective way. It's an intimate gathering, an intimate way to meet half a dozen or 10 or 20 new friends and raise some donations. Your donations are tax deductible. We just completed a matching grant campaign. We got some grant money from a little foundation in Idaho and then doubled donations for the month of June. We hope to do more of that. We've made some friends at Google. We want to make more with the tech companies in the Valley because most of the tech companies double employee donations. So our friends at Google who donate to InStove get double the impact because Google matches every penny they give us. And get to know us better. I'm very available. I'm very accessible. I answer every email. I love to talk about stoves. I'm really an introvert, but this work has just taken over my life, and I love doing it, and I love making new friends, and I love working together with people. We've got to collaborate if we're going to change the world.
Okay, so just before the next question, I just wanted to mention there's a gentleman that's come a couple of times who talked about solar ovens. He's been to Nepal many times, and he does work similar to yours, but his focus is on solar ovens rather than these stoves. Yeah. And he has set up a scheme in Nepal, if I remember correctly, to make these little pellets you talk about. And he's putting disabled people, giving them work, because otherwise they're basically left to die, yeah. Blind and disabled people, and he's getting them involved. You were talking about these women sort of communities, so we should connect you guys together too. It seems there's a very similar, if you don't know about him, it seems there's a very similar thing going on.
Yeah, I've met a lot of folks who are promoting solar cooking and solar solutions to problems in the developing world. They have their own set of barriers to overcome.
Yeah.
But yeah, there are kind of natural collaborative partnerships that we're very interested in. We're working in our lab now to make a pellet feeder for our stove so it could burn pellet fuel.
Yes, I think this is a great game changer, and I'd love to see it happen. Professor Jared Diamond at UCLA points out something that is still not being solved today. The cooking, you've solved that. The problem is occasionally when you have a drought or some problem with the crops, there's no food to cook. The problem is that the government could care less about having emergency supplies. So what do you do? And I'm wondering if you could adapt your stove to some way that you preserve, that when there's a surplus crop, you could preserve it without electricity or what have you, and also now you'd have a reserve when there is a drought.
Yeah. Yeah, the short answer is yes. I was just out in Wisconsin at the Midwest Renewable Energy Fair, where we were promoting our stoves plus the pressure cooker that the Wisconsin Aluminum Foundry makes. It's identical, same shape as the autoclave. And we were promoting home canning using the stove and the pressure cooker. That the Wisconsin pressure cooker is the favorite wedding gift of the Amish people, right? Because it'll last for generations. In the developing world, preserving food is tricky, and I think we have a lot of work to do to get to some kind of systematic preservation of excess crops. You know, we kind of have to segment our work, and my vision is that we collaborate with a bunch of different partners looking at different aspects of problems that need to be solved. So how do we get there? I don't know, but I'd certainly be interested in having a conversation and seeing, you know, maybe a light bulb will light up. Hang on, yeah.
I'm sorry. This is just a low-cost possible solution. It's called sous vide, the French word without air. And you put the food in little plastic bags and seal it right away.
Yeah.
Then you cook it, and it does the same thing of the fruit jars and things like that without all of that problem.
Yeah,
it might be a very inexpensive way to solve it.
Let's talk offline, yeah.
Yeah, the Middle East peace process stumbles when it gets to a question of guaranteed availability of potable water. And so I was wondering about what are you doing in refugee camps in the Middle East and also in particular Gaza?
Well, we're not terribly active in the Middle East because the UN is kind of the umbrella agency for refugees, and their stated policy is they're not going to use solid fuel for Middle East refugees, where the most of the world's refugees are. So they're basically saying we're not going to promote any technology that burns solid fuel, like the InStove. Now, I've seen hundreds of pictures of refugees and Syrian refugees cooking on wood fires. There's often this disconnect between high-level management and the reality of the field in organizations from the UN to the Red Cross to every place else. How do we get over that? I don't know. I really don't. Yeah, we come in at the field level, but we're starting to have conversations inside the Beltway in DC where we're talking to administrators and policymakers, and that's we're hoping this year that we see some breakthroughs with large organizations to become more effective in those camps. The camps are tinderboxes, right? The Middle East camps are tinderboxes because they're failed institutions, and they're just fomenting revolution and radicalism.
Well, maybe there's something there might be a go-around by access to raw materials.
Yeah.
So maybe the follow-ups, you guys can follow up with you afterwards if you've got follow-up on questions. We've got 4 more people with questions. So.
Okay. I can smell that lunch.
A quick suggestion and a couple of questions. Have you considered preheating the feed water for the pasteurizer, perhaps using solar, such as simple painting the things black? And this question, you said the cooker cost about $1,000. What size was that? And could you give us a breakdown on the labor and materials and things like that? Thank you.
Sure. First question, the pasteurizer, the first element is a heat exchanger. So as the water enters the system, we're preheating the water with exiting pasteurized water. You can always do more, right? But they're kind of diminishing returns as we start adding bells and whistles to a simply elegant system. If we start adding a larger chain, there are more things to go wrong. So our focus is kind of to keep it simple and make it as efficient as possible. And right now there's no more efficient way to deliver, or cost-effective way to deliver safe water than our pasteurizer. And we've looked at a lot of literature, and on this volume it really works. And I'm sorry, I forgot your second question. Pardon? Oh, the cost. Our 60-liter stove is $850. Our 100-liter stove is $995. That's FOB, our factory in Oregon. That's about $500 to $600 in materials, about $1 to $150 in labor, and a tiny amount of overhead and a tiny margin. We really have put we've proven the non-profitability of nonprofits, and we still have to become sustainable. We still have to. We're not charging enough, but our goal is to reduce prices. So our goal is not to make a bundle, but we need to get to sustainability. We'd like to work on our value chain. We'd like to drive our input prices down. We're looking at some government grants to bring some more tools to our production process that'll reduce the unit cost, and where we make more of our own parts rather than outsourcing. So our goal is to drive the prices down. With international construction, the labor costs go from $150 or $200 down to $5 to $15, which is a prevailing daily wage for skilled help in the developing world. So that alone will help drive prices down. But I'd like to see my prices down to about half what they are now. I'm not going to do that overnight. I'm not going to do that without help. Yes.
Hi, I was wondering if you had any plans for developing smaller units. And I thought of it because when I was in Oaxaca, there were lots of people just sitting around or squatting on the sidewalks cooking on the comal, little tortillas and things.
Yeah.
And it seemed like, individual family cooking like that was the prevailing model. So I was wondering if you were going to develop smaller, like family-sized units.
Sure. We're going to Oaxaca. That's our first major Mexico project is in Oaxaca. The federal government in Mexico is building community kitchens across the country. They're building thousands of them, but all they are is structures. And then these community kitchens, people go in and cook on 3 rocks on the ground. We have a pilot project in the works to bring 15 stoves down to prove that InStoves make sense in those community kitchens. As far as household stoves are concerned, we're kind of in this niche of institutional stoves on purpose because it's much simpler. The sociology of cooking a big pot of food, it's not like, in a household cooking, women want their food to taste like the food their grandmothers made. And that's very hard to accomplish with a radical change of technology. It's also very hard to deliver a high-quality industrial stove to poor women who can afford $5. It's just not possible. We have colleagues working on household stoves. Our best example is an organization called Burn Manufacturing, and we're partnering with Burn in Nairobi, Kenya, and we're going to bring our institutional stove manufacturing to the Burn factory where they are making household stoves, and they're making the finest industrial stove in Africa with African labor. There's still too much money. They still cost $40, so they're kind of only for the middle class, but we're moving forward. We're going to leave household stoves to colleagues because I haven't figured out how to bilocate yet, and we really want to stay with our core mission and perfect these institutional stoves and get them where we can really have impact. If you can feed 500 people a day with one stove, your impact can be huge. Yes. Yep.
This has been very inspiring, and we do have a speakers table, and hope you'll, after you get your lunch, bring it over, and people who want to ask questions or find out more can meet you there.
Okay, great. And please visit my table and help yourself to literature, and please sign my mailing list, and thank you. You've been wonderful.
Thanks very much.